character Troy Maxon and his loss of his dream to play baseball in the Negro Leagues. And August Wilson uses baseball instances to illustrate the racism in America and how the American dream is essentially unattainable for African Americans. So Troy Maxon grew up with all the odds against him. His mother ran away when he was 8 years old and left his father to raise his 11 brothers and sisters alone. Eventually Troy leaves home at age 14 and starts stealing food and money just to survive. Eventually gets married and has a kid and has to steal even more to provide for his family. And in one incident, he tries to rob a man and eventually he actually kills the man and is arrested and goes to jail for 15 years. During that time, his wife leaves him and takes his child away. And while he was in jail, he learned how to play baseball, and so once he got out of jail, he started playing baseball in the Negro Leagues, and found that he was really good at it. He was a really good baseball player. And through baseball, he thinks that he can actually have a chance to be successful and get out of his poor lifestyle that he's grown accustomed to. However, he was eventually forced to retire from baseball and ends up just becoming a garbage man. So this is about several years later that the play actually starts. So he's really bitter with the situation and upset with the system and won't let anyone else try to make it any better because he knows that the system worked against him and he's really bitter about it. So within the play he makes a lot of baseball references, and just because that was his dream, his goal, and he was prevented from achieving that and becoming successful from it. So his best friend Bono, who also he met while he was in prison, told him that there ain't but two men ever played baseball as good as you. That's Babe Ruth and Josh Gibson. Them's the only two men that ever hit more home runs than you. Then Troy comes back with, what'd ever get me? Ain't got a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. So really he just shows his overwhelming hatred and bitterness toward white Americans who didn't let him get anywhere in life because of the fact that he was black and they held him back. And got absolutely no benefit from playing baseball at all, even though it's like the American sport and anyone who is good should be able to be well off, but no, it didn't happen that way. And in the end, he has a son later on who, his son wants to play football for college, and Troy's like, he tells his son that you shouldn't even try, like the white man's just going to keep you down, and he in fact tells his son, the white man ain't going to let you get nowhere with that football, no way. You go on and get your book learning so you can work yourself up in that A&P, or learn how to fix cars or build houses or something, get a trade. That way you have something can't nobody take away from you. Basically, he just wants his son to get a practical job that he can become successful at, so that something that the white people won't take away from them. Basically, again, the system isn't intended for African Americans to be successful. So later on in the play, he's talking and comparing two baseball players who were pretty famous back in the 1940s or 50s or something. There's George Selkirk, who played right field for the Yankees after Babe Ruth, and according to Troy, he wasn't that good of a baseball player. And then there's Josh Gibson, who was a really good Negro League player who was, again, like Troy, kind of forced to quit because he was African American. And he says, Troy says, I saw Josh Gibson's daughter yesterday. She was walking around with raggedy shoes on her feet. Now, I'll bet you Selkirk's daughter ain't walking around with raggedy shoes on her feet. I bet you that. Basically, the players that are better aren't able to become as successful because of their skin color, whereas mediocre players are able to advance higher because of their whiteness, and he's just really fed up with that. And later, his wife Rose is saying, well, they've got a lot of colored baseball players now. Jackie Robinson was first. Folks had to wait for Jackie Robinson. And Troy comes back and says, I done seen 100 niggers playing baseball better than Jackie Robinson. Hell, I know some teams Jackie Robinson couldn't even make. What are you talking about Jackie Robinson? Jackie Robinson wasn't nobody. Talking about if you could play ball, then they ought to let you have played. Don't care what color you were. Basically, he's also fed up, even though that Jackie Robinson was the first base black player to be able to play in the major leagues. Jackie Robinson wasn't the top baseball player, but they let him in just because he would work well with the white players and not become offended or super upset by all the racism he would face with that. And Troy just believes that people who are good should be allowed to play even though they don't have the same color, which, again, he doesn't have the most uplifting views about that. He's really upset by it and lets his bitterness show through, even though what he's saying is really what Major League should have been thinking the whole time, is that good players should be allowed to play regardless of what they look like. So, really, Troy just wants fairness, not color preference. So, there's one critic I found, Susan Kofrans, who actually made an interesting connection with Troy and baseball. She said that there's two different schools of baseball. There's the Babe Ruth school, where the most honored thing to do in baseball is to get home runs, and that's what good baseball players are trying to do, is get as many home runs as they can, because that's the pinnacle of success within baseball, and that's like the white man version of how to play baseball, is to just hit them out of the park. And that's kind of where Troy sits in his situation. He's a really good home run hitter. He's really good at hitting home runs, and that's what he looks forward to do. And she said on the other side, there's what African Americans started doing. They started changing the game a little bit by doing more tricky kinds of moves, like bunting or trying to steal second base and stuff. And Troy kind of he identifies himself with the white style of baseball, but then he also kind of shifts into like the African American style, just with the way he's talking about his life in some points of the play, such as about halfway through, he tells his wife about this affair he's having on the side with some lady, and he tells his wife that the lady he had an affair with is pregnant, and he's just telling her about that. And she says that for once in his life, he's been standing on first base for his whole life with his wife, and he just for once wants to steal second. He just wants to move out of the place that he's in. So it's during his low points that he kind of switches sides and kind of shows like he has a split identity too. And then another place he also says that when he married Rose, he kind of tricked people, and he said he bunted rather than hit it out of the park. So he's just using the language of baseball to show his relationships with other people. And pretty interesting. And then, so the final scene of Troy alive, he is standing in batting position, taunting death to come and get him, which basically sums up his entire life in American society. He just wants to be a baseball player, but just is tossed aside and ridiculed and just torn down, and in the end he is a baseball player in everything he does, but he just isn't allowed to play actually. So just has a crazy kind of life.